January 16th meeting of the Westwood School Committee to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'd like to recognize Westwood Media Center for live streaming the meeting and recording for later viewing on its platforms. Thank you so much. We appreciate our partnership with Westwood Media Center. So I will hand it over to Tim.
Sure. It's a very brief superintendent's report this evening, considering the fact that we had pushed back our December meeting, and there really has not been a whole lot of stuff happening in schools in between our two meetings. Obviously, we're bringing people back. It's all the Happy New Year to everybody. I should say that as well, too. One thing I did want to highlight, if people have not seen it, there was a great article in the Globe recently about our financial literacy courses at the high school, and we have been hearing from people all over the place about this. A lot of people offering to help in ways that are nice, but may not. I just appreciate all the offers we have coming in, but it's been great to highlight that, and that's really great. The other thing that I just have on the agenda, all of you have a copy of this. This is the annual report from TEC, the Education Collaborative. Our old friend Emily Parks, who's the executive director over there, wanted to make sure that everybody has this. It's actually part of the requirement in the collaborative regulations to make sure that there's an update provided to the school committee members. The committee members get the annual report. So we wanted to make sure that you had that. I have the pleasure of sitting not only on the board of TEC, but also on their budget subcommittee as well, too. So I'm happy if any of you have any questions at any times about this, happy to certainly talk about that. And they provide a great service not only to our students in their schools, but also in terms of job-alike groups and professional development for our staff. And we are also part of their data privacy conglomeration. I should say, as it relates to that, we are fortunate here. People may have seen the whole issue with PowerSchool, which is one of the information systems that's out there, and a data breach with student information. That does not impact us here in Westwood, so we are okay on that front. I just want to say that sort of clearly and transparently. We use some of their project for Talent Ed is their HR platform, but the breach was limited on the student side, and so I'm happy that that is not the vendor we're using for student data, so there was no issue on that front. With that being said, that's really the report, unless, Amanda, you'd like me to move into another area in advance on the agenda.
I think it might make sense, if you don't mind, Tim, to move the preschool, the integrated preschool update up into your report, if
Sure.
that's okay, in advance of public participation.
Absolutely, very happy to do that.
Thank you.
So just want to provide some context around what's happening with preschool structure, and there is a request for the committee to vote a tuition rate later on in the agenda this evening. So we have talked for multiple, at least in the time that I've been here, and certainly it predates my time here as well too, that we have challenges based upon space limitations with the existing footprint of Westwood Integrated Preschool. We only have 3 classrooms there. I know that there was additional space that was to be able to be created during COVID by taking over the weight room, or the fitness center, I should say, at the high school. But we have high school crunches we have high school space crunch right now as well too, as evidenced by the fact that we actually moved out a town program last year to expand our bridge program. So we're really limited by the physical footprint, and this is something that we're studying as part of our master planning facility study as well too. So the context is that a typical integrated preschool classroom in Massachusetts has a class size of 15. That's 7 students who are receiving special education services, 8 peer model students, and state guidelines require the number of peer model students to exceed the number of students with disabilities in a classroom. So we currently have those 3 classrooms with students attending 4 or 5 days with various dismissal times, and at our maximum capacity right now, by state regulation, it supports 21 students with IEPs and 24 peer model students. The issue that we're having and experiencing is that the number of students with disabilities who are entitled, both legally and I would certainly argue morally, that we have an obligation to support, that number increases as the year progresses and as students age into preschool programming. So we have been required to apply for class size waivers from DESE on an annual basis, and in recent years our enrollment has grown to between 17 and 21 students when the cap is 15 in any given year. Students are often referred through early intervention, and I know you have some data in the memo, and that memo will be posted online with the regular school committee packages. In terms of how those referrals yield students requiring program services. Those referrals occur when a student is 2.6 years of age. And as referrals come in and students are identified as eligible, we have to create spaces in the program regardless of seat availability. So typically, because of our space constraints and because of what our enrollment is with students on IEPs at the beginning of a year, we only may have 3 to 8 seats open. In 21-22, we had 15 students qualify mid-year, the following year 15, the following year 18. We're at 7 already this year, and that's less than halfway through the current year that we're in. So we anticipate this space crunch again right now. And as I said before, class sizes have had to exceed 15 students. That requires a waiver for us to deal with that. The referrals over the past few years show increases in all of these areas: autism-related disabilities, social emotional deficits, developmental delays, increasing behavioral challenges, lagging social skills and readiness, and medical and physical challenges. We also have a small number of students that have been able to be accommodated through WABA, first at Downey and now at Pine Hill. But enrollment numbers in WABA at Pine Hill are increasing, and priority has to be given to students in K-5, as well as the fact that programmatically it makes more sense. We want preschool students to be with preschool-aged peers. And so that is part of the consideration we have here as well. For peer district context, neighboring and comparable towns typically offer half-day preschool options to most students, usually 2.5 to 3 hours of length, which for the majority of students is most appropriate to achieve a free and appropriate public education. All districts, and anything that we're proposing would also do this here, for some students with greater needs would offer extended hours. So this shows, and this is a smattering of districts sort of in the area, whether it's geographically or some of the peer comp districts that we use, what our existing programming in preschool is on the top line. And then you can see the rest of the districts here. They're typically anywhere from 2 to 5 day options, 2.5 or 3 hours a day, again, with some exceptions that are spelled out. But when you look at the cumulative hours of preschool per week, we are significantly higher than peer districts. And so for a plan going forward, our goal here, and our primary goal, is that we want to open more seats for students with disabilities while doing so within the current physical space and staffing model. The proposal for 25-26 is that for new preschool students, we would move to a program that consists of 4 or 5 half days with 2.5 hours of instruction a day. That's similar to our model peer districts, with a morning session from 8:45 to 11:15 and an afternoon session from 12 to 2:30. And again, we would offer that full day program for students with more severe disabilities 5 days a week. We also know that families that are in the program currently, we want to make sure that we are not changing course midstream. This is, in terms of a time to make the change, we have 21 students graduating from preschool this year. So this allows us to implement the change with the least disruption to families. And that full day option that for existing families, we would continue for 25-26, but would not be offered to new students or siblings of existing students. To talk about the benefits to the structure, as I said before, this allows us to increase the opportunities to serve and support increasing student need population. It allows us to provide services for all students in a preschool setting as opposed to some in an elementary school setting. It allows Pine Hill to support their increased needs within WABA there. We're going to be talking about the FY26 budget, and while this is not a primary driver, it's a constraint, but this is a proposal that is cost neutral, not requiring additional staffing or resources. It utilizes our current space, keeping the program together without having to create a satellite room and a level of disconnect from the rest of the program. It allows us to maintain our compliance with DESE without having to do waiver requests. And honestly, it buys us some time. We anticipate that enrollment in preschool or students who qualify with disabilities will continue to increase. We're seeing this here, we're seeing this regionally, we're seeing this statewide, we're seeing this nationally, and this buys us some time for a mid-range to long-range solutions to come out as part of our master planning study. And then I will just add to this. I mean, there was some conversation at our last committee meeting about whether or not to increase the preschool tuition at the rate higher than 3%. Given the structural changes that we're proposing, I think it would be inappropriate to do that at this point in time, and that we would just want to maintain that standard 3% increase from $11.81 an hour to $12.16 an hour for those full-day students who are peer model students who attend 5 days a week currently. At maximum, that's $346 over the course of a year just for some context about that, with other students paying proportionally lower based upon hours attending. So I want to recognize that this is a change that we're proposing. Again, we are not looking to do anything that will impact existing families. We want to be able to grandfather existing families in. But at the same time, we need to be responsive to the needs of our students. We want to make sure that we create space for those students with disabilities in a way that is appropriate for students to be able to achieve a free and appropriate public education and meet the goals that are set out for them. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments from the committee about this.
I have two questions. When we are utilizing the Pine Hill, the WABA program for the preschool students, are they with the K through, with K through 5? Or are
It's
they-
K through 2.
They're in the lower WABA
They're
program,
low-
which typically is K to 2, sometimes can have third graders based on total enrollment.
Okay, so, but they're integrated into that classroom as opposed to being by themselves in a separate?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. My second question, is it possible, and maybe, I don't think this is for this year since we're just doing a 3%, but next year, can we think about looking at the comps in terms of the tuitions? I mean, I know this is saying that we're low, I'd just like to see where we are in the market.
Yeah, in terms of other public school programs, they're kind of, I mean, actually, you've done some of the dig on this, so if I can defer to you here.
What I found is that there's a really wide range in terms of how districts are pricing this. So there are districts that are lower than us in terms of their hourly rate, some even as low as, I think $6 an hour was something we saw somewhere. But there are also districts that are significantly higher. They went up as high as 18, if I recall. So there's quite a range. And there's also, as you saw, a range of models. And so for some of the ones that were charging much more, they were shorter days. And so this wasn't a full day, full week program for those families. It's likely a shorter program.
Okay. And sorry, one more question.
And actually, I would just add to that too, right? And then there's obviously private preschool options,
Yes.
which are at a
Which are
significantly higher.
significantly higher,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right, yep. And then finally, when we have students come in mid-year because they age in, and we, you know, that immediately sort of throws the ratio off. Is that when we apply for the waiver right then? And so are we constantly applying for waivers throughout the year, or how does it work?
I'll defer to Sue here. If you,
Historically, it looks like they've applied once to twice per year, when I looked back at the last 5 years or so.
Okay.
And have they been, I mean, has there ever been pushback when we've applied for the waivers, or has there ever been a question about whether we might not get a waiver? Do you know?
I'm not seeing anything related to that. Typically, when you can explain the total need, it's appreciated and the waivers are granted.
yeah, I think that being said, though, there is a question of educational efficacy, though, too, right? I
So
mean,
that
when we
was the
have-
next,
Yeah.
right? When you're putting additional students in, do we have to then compensate with additional staff, or are we still within some sort of pedagogical ratio or something?
They have increased the staffing in different years. I've seen that information, but it does change the entire experience for all students
Yep.
when you're adding that number to a already confined space.
Related to that, we don't add, you know, if we want our peer model to be equal to or more than, you know, so that it's an equal balance, do we add additional peer students as well? Or does that, no, right?
There's, the data that I could look through did not appear as though we were adding additional peers. There was the special education numbers that were going up, and that's why they were applying for a waiver, because they were no
Right.
longer in compliance with that requirement of more students who are in a peer role and fewer students in a special ed role.
Thank you.
Tim, if you go back to the, I think there was it was the second chart, maybe the first chart where it was at the, yeah. So how does this change our more model going forward? I have, I have the numbers, but is there a future state comparator here?
So if you look, I have to put my glasses on. If you look in the first row and you see the existing classroom structure, sure. Dan, do you want to, feel free, Dan, to come up too. So right now in the existing structure, students who have special education offering are typically offered 2 hours a day. Would you say that's the best average?
Yeah.
About 2 hours a day, and they're here for a 4-hour block. So in creating a morning and an afternoon, we're still offering what exceeds their current IEP recommendation of, say, 2 hours a day, but we're doing it in a 2.5-hour block versus a 4 to 5.75 block. This doesn't reduce special education services currently being offered to any child.
But I think to answer your question, right, you're saying like, what would this, using this chart, what would that data look like? And correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be essentially equivalent to Hopkinton's line, right? 4 or 5 days at 2.5 hours a day, 10 to
Correct.
12.5?
Yes, that would be the best comparison on
Yeah.
the chart.
Okay.
So to one point and one question. So this is a longer range conversation we've had. We need to have a consistent set of districts because, you know, I'm a little suspicious naturally. So whether that's be tech or athletically, because I don't know. I always worry, are we cherry picking? So I want to see what tech look like, for lack of a better district. Let's put all those on there to see if there's any outliers. The other one is, I don't know if you followed what happened in East Longmeadow. They just actually, they went to this route and they weren't getting enough peer. This may not happen in this community because we have such demand, but they weren't then getting enough peer applicants because they all wanted a full day. So they actually just reverse course and enter the full day. So that may not be an issue in this community because we don't have a lot of, but it's interesting that it just happened recently in the last week of another community.
So I didn't know about that, but that was my first thought.
Yeah.
I was like, how are we going to get enough peer
Do we have
students?
any data on demand at 2.5 hours as opposed to the 4 or 5.75?
No, we do have a wait list at the current model.
Yeah, we haven't sent out applications yet. We've put it on hold, and we're hoping to have that sent out soon, so that demand answer, we hope we'll have that information for you soon.
Do we know last year how many peer, what was the wait list on peer? Was there a wait list?
I don't,
Yeah.
I think we can probably get that for you, but I don't.
There is one,
Oh, there is
I
one.
don't know the exact
Okay.
number right now.
Have to get it.
It's a lottery system, so I don't know if I have to call it a wait list, but yeah.
Wow, okay.
Students were waiting after the lottery.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Got it.
we can get that for you.
Yeah, just a number.
To Tony's point, I think my thought too is I know some of the other preschools in town that offer half days also offer an option for like extended day where it's maybe not as structured, but it's still socialization and it's time at school. So I wonder if that wouldn't impact, the attractiveness of peer students coming too. And I also wonder if some of these towns don't offer that. That would be helpful to know. Obviously, the hours of actual educational programming are noted, but if there are like lunch bunch or extended day options that other towns are offering.
I remember when there was a change made a couple of years ago with respect to siblings and so forth, and I know that there were some equity issues with that, but I think also, I'm just remembering that part of the impetus of that is space, right? And that is also the impetus here, is we just don't have enough space.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. That's the unfortunate reality. We have 3 classrooms. There is nothing on the horizon to be able to increase. I mean, the way you would increase capacity right now would be renting private real estate somewhere else in town. And somebody, I mean, I'm just going to say it because people out there may be thinking it would be Deerfield, but then you are literally splitting the program up. And when that happens, you wind up with different kinds of experiences for different kids as well. And I can say that, from my experience in the past, I did have, we had a much larger preschool because of a different sized community, but we had 9 preschool classrooms in one location, 2 in another. And those 2 classrooms in the other location consistently felt like outliers in the preschool program because they weren't part of the cohesiveness of the program as a whole.
Oh, and it makes sense too, right? Because then the specialists have to go back and forth between buildings, including, the nurse, the SLP, and so forth, and that's, and I remember talking with others about this kind of a couple of years ago, that it is really hard, for example, and maybe you and I have talked about this, to retrofit a preschool space into a 5th grade classroom.
Yeah.
Because you have to just rip down and change everything.
Yeah.
What is the kind of impetus to be doing this now in advance of getting the results of the master planning study? Is it because we have that cohort of students that are graduating, so the time is right? It seems like maybe it might make sense to wait if we could, but I don't I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, and Sue, you can talk to this more if you want, but I mean, that really is the impetus, is this is the year in which it would have the least impact on existing, or the least impact of implementation because of the number of students that are aging out of preschool this year.
Preschools typically run in a sort of a 3-year cycle because the kids are there from 3 to 6 or 3 to kindergarten eligible. So you tend to see these sort of 3-year trends. And we're at sort of that point now where we have that maximum number aging out, and then our numbers will start to grow over the next 3 years again. And then that's cumulative over each 3-year set. So we are primed for this opportunity now based on the rising kindergartners who will be graduating from preschool.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm still formulating.
Okay. I guess my question is more sort of how far along are we in this? Like, what's the status of where all of this stands today?
Yeah, so we, at this stage, because of what we are seeing for enrollment plans, we are looking to publicize this with the preschool community, with the community as a whole. This is obviously the first place to do that is here at this meeting, and then that would be followed up by conversation directly out to families after this.
So, and I'm hoping you can answer this
Yeah.
question. So this is clearly somewhat disruptive, right? And I know it makes things more difficult for families who, are used to the longer day. So I guess but it's a cost benefit analysis, right? So I guess the question is, those are sort of the obvious negatives to us, right? And I see the benefits. Is there like I guess I'm not really seeing a huge educational benefit, right? Like I see administrative benefits here, right? We can, don't have to apply for the waivers, cost neutral, utilize current space. But at the end of the day, really, I think we should be trying to provide the best education as possible to as many students as possible. And the question is, is that a significant enough benefit to outweigh these concerns?
Yeah, so, and I will let Sue and Dan, follow up with my response here. When you take a look at what the impact of class sizes are when you're hitting 19, 20, 21 in the preschool setting, the efficacy of the kind of instruction that can be delivered to students in that setting is significantly lower than when you're able to maintain class size within guidelines of 15 for pre-K. But I'll let you add on to that.
Yeah, and I would add to that with the opportunity for our students in special education with the highest level of need to be able to have a preschool experience in a building and a facilities designed for preschool. The Pine Hill playground is beautiful, it's wonderful, it's not preschool friendly. It's a really tangible example of an impact for our preschoolers. I'd love them to be in Dan's preschool, in Dan's building, where they have things that are sized for them. The bathrooms, have you seen those preschool potties? Really, really, those are educational things because we're building independence, we're building skills, and they're doing it with their age-like peers. I think that's a great educational benefit.
I also want to highlight, we're talking a lot about the numbers, which is clear. This is a trend. It's not just this year that we're seeing that we're kind of growing out of our pants. But there's also the level of need that we're also serving that is really important too. We're not only having more students that qualify for services, but many of the students that do require more support. And so while we're trying to make more space, we're also trying for more kids. We also have a challenge when we have more kids in one classroom, and sometimes we have to add another adult. So the more molecules you put in one space, the harder it is for stability. And a lot of our students that require more support, that is counterproductive for what their needs are. We're trying to find a quiet space for them. So the limited space it's really important for me to highlight the need of not just the growing numbers, but also to meet the level of need for the students that are coming through our system.
Yeah, the last thing I would add to that too, and I forget who asked the question a couple of minutes ago, which is when we add the seats, do we add peer model students? The answer is no, because then you're essentially doubling what your impact is. But as those numbers increase, you're not really running as much of an integrated preschool anymore because of what the ratios are between students with disabilities and peer model students. So that changes the nature of the model of the program as well.
But this is all based on the assumption that we will have enough demand in the peer model cohort.
That's correct.
Especially in the afternoon. I mean, when before my time here in Westwood, my younger son was in an afternoon preschool program, and it was hard on us and on him, because that's when he otherwise would be napping. So as a pure parent, I could see parents making different decisions. So I think that the demand, or the question of will there be a demand in the afternoon especially, is a fair question to consider.
Just one more math question, Dan. So do we start in September at 15, and then as kids age in, what do we start at generally?
It varies year to year.
About, but I mean, what's,
Do you have a
like
sense
this year,
in the
what do we do?
last couple of years?
This year, we were almost full. We only had a couple slots available that were open. I'm not
Open for
100%
new students.
Correct. And
At
so-
the start of the year.
Correct.
For new peer students.
No, for just,
For just-
for anybody.
But we have to take anyone on an IEP, correct?
And that means we were closer to the waiver at the start of this year than most
Got
in the
it.
past.
Okay.
To the afternoon point, in the model configuration that we've discussed, there's 8 afternoon slots, and that's it. There's not, so we're not actually looking for a very large number. We're looking for 8 peer models for that afternoon slot. And they may not even all be available based on students who are returning.
So does this have any impact to how you would staff things? Or is it the same hours? So they would just stay?
Yeah, it's a staffing neutral
Okay.
plan, so there's no budgetary impact, there's no staffing impact. The only thing, you'll see this in the budget presentation, we talk about the admin assistant position, but that even outside of a model change, we would have made that recommendation anyway.
Okay.
But-
Any other comments on this? Not seeing any. Just for clarity's sake, so what's kind of the next step as far as administration and the school committee is concerned? I know we're voting on the increase in tuition, but what's the next step regarding this kind of reorg?
So in terms of that, I'm certainly hearing the committee's feedback this evening. In hearing it, I think it was probably valuable, because there were some questions raised, to answer those questions, bring this back to the meeting in February for further discussion. I think at the same time, where it's out there, I think there is value in sort of publicizing this discussion with obviously the family community. But then we'll bring it back for further discussion in February, if that makes sense to everybody.
If you can get data the last, don't go too back, like 3 years and what it started at, it'd just be interesting data.
Sure.
I think that plus the other point that you made around, can we look at
Yeah, oh yeah, well, I want to see
Yeah,
some,
yeah.
whether it's tech or athletically,
Yeah.
just be something consistent.
Concern is just the timeline. I don't know, Dan or Sue, if you have thoughts on the timeline when families need to apply. That's the one concern that made us, like.
So February is a pretty big enrollment month for preschools everywhere. So if we want families to have an opportunity to participate in a lottery, we'll need to be thoughtful about that timeline, because they might need to make a decision by accessing another program.
In fact, a lot of the local private
It's already
programs
started.
in Westwood have already started their process, and their deadlines have already passed.
Yep.
And-
Their deadlines have passed, so they've already had to make decisions?
Yeah, many of them, I meet with, regularly, and I'm gonna meet with them in a few weeks as well. And some of them have flexibility for students who require IEPs, and they'll provide that to the families. But I can't speak for all of them. Some of them do. But they are ahead of us. They started that process a couple years ago, where they used to have a similar timeline as ours with regards to when registration would begin, but they started it sooner, just because of the demand within the community.
Yep.
It was warranted to be.
I don't know, I kind of feel like with a shift this big, I'd rather wait and hear from the community before I don't know.
Also,
I
is
guess
this
it's not our
something-
decision,
I was
but,
gonna
you
say,
know,
do we-
right.
Do we vote on it?
Well, I don't
Sounds
think
like we
we're
vote on
voting
the
on the
budget.
shift, we just vote on the
Right.
tuition.
Yeah.
Budget.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. At the same time, though, I know that all of us at this table need to be responsive to these concerns, right? And so, I think certainly, I would recommend the committee go forward and vote the tuition either way this evening, right? So
Sure.
we can
Yeah.
at least publicize that.
Sure.
And then we will certainly, the next meeting is February 13th, I believe, which is also the night we're voting the budget too. So it's a good night all the way around. But we will, we will certainly have these answers for you and bring them back for the next meeting.
Can I ask just a process question then? Previous, we had talked about increasing tuition. With this change, you're suggesting we stay only at the 3%. Are we voting for a 3% increase regardless? Or if, for whatever, if we decide as a community to keep our current model, would we then go back and reconsider the tuition?
That is an interesting question. That I hate to tell you is actually a question for the five of you to answer. Although at the same time you would rely on my recommendation. I'm not sure what my recommendation. I need to give that some thought.
Okay.
But it's also on the agenda for you to vote on the
But can
3%
we-
tuition tonight. I
Right,
mean,
if we vote on the 3% tonight, we can always, well, no, because.
yeah, because the problem is then it would be out there
Right,
and just say
right,
you're
yeah,
doing.
no,
So
yeah.
I mean, I think the options for the committee later on the agenda this evening are either to vote the 3% as proposed, if you're comfortable with that regardless, or to table that motion until the February 13th meeting.
And I think in February, if you can also sort of, I don't know how, whether informally or anecdotally, come with some data on the demand from the peer cohort on whether or not 2.5 hours is gonna, I know we only need 8, but I don't know, I would just be interested in that.
Appreciate that.
Can I add just one more thing? As we mentioned earlier, we've worked towards creating a model that will honor the current schedules for these kids in the school as best we can. In order to do that, we do have certain slots are going to be made available to honor the current schedules of kids. So not all 8, but there's going to be some students that will already take up some of those numbers. So we're not necessarily going to be needing 8. We're likely going to, based on the current numbers that I looked at, I think there's about 5.
Okay.
So there's 3 of them that are already accounted for because we're honoring the current, because some
But
of our students.
eventually, when we're in like, regular,
3 to 4 years
yeah,
out.
3 to 4 years from now, you're gonna need a cohort of students to fill that afternoon. So, I
Correct.
mean, both slots, really,
Sooner.
but the afternoon
You know,
slot, yeah.
next year will be a transition year that we're planning for that would account for the current, what we currently allow students to tuition and, for beyond what we're making available for the new students.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more thing? I mean, I hear from both of you a sense of support of this move, but I just want to ask directly if this is a move you support.
I think it's essential to meet the needs of the students who have special education needs who live in Westwood.
Thank you.
And I'm in strong favor of a model that does that. Excuse me.
I agree.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll just say, we all know I'm a very big fan of special needs support. I think a really big component of special needs students is to have peer models around. And so if there was a deficit, I think that could be problematic.
But I think what we're hearing is there is a deficit, given the increase in population over the course of the year, that we actually have an imbalance between peer models and students with special needs.
Yeah, there's an
That's true.
existing deficit
An existing deficit.
already.
Right. But so I don't know if this model changes that, potentially.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I don't know if it solves that problem.
Theoretically, it would, right? Theoretically, it would solve the.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you get us the data? Can you show us how many the peer model and go longer than 2.5 hours or 3 hours or whatever the half day is? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll flesh all that out.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So now we can open it up to public participation. So if any members of the community would like to address the committee, please feel free to come up, share your name and your address.
Come up, so, yes. Hello, committee members and administrators and friends and neighbors. My name is Stacy Theophilou, and I've been a mom of a student in this district for 13 years. My son's a senior, which is crazy to me. And I want to just start, I'm not here particularly for this reason, but I want to start first by expressing my gratitude for the school committee and the administrators, because you guys have been here for so many years, dedicated to the students of this town. And speaking specifically to special education, I have to say that my son has benefited tremendously from your commitment to serving the students that have special education needs. And he started in first grade. We identified like many learning disabilities, and he got the support that he needed early, and put in tremendous amount of hard work. And I am now the proud parent of a future engineering college student. And it would not have been nearly as possible without your continued dedication. So thank you all very much for putting in much more time and effort than I ever did, and a lot of us in this town do. So you deserve our gratitude. So I learned a lot in my college research process. I have learned that it is so much harder to get into college these days, and it is so much more competitive, which brings me to the actual reason that I'm here today. And I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but my daughter came home from school today. I have a sophomore, and she said, "Mom, I've tried so hard the last 2 years to learn Mandarin, and I've just been told that they're cutting the Mandarin program for next year, and I have to start all over in a new language. Is that true? Or can I just leave after saying thank you, and because that's not true? Or is that true, and I have to go on and explain to you why that's, in my opinion, not a good idea?" Because no communication has come out to parents. It was just communicated to the students today in the classroom.
So unfortunately, this isn't a Q&A
Okay.
opportunity. We absorb everybody's comments and take them under advisement. I will say that I believe that is going to be discussed when we get to the budget part of the presentation.
Okay, well then I will preempt that discussion by sharing my opinion with you. So I don't have a strong critical desire for my daughter to learn Mandarin, right? And if I needed to have her learn Mandarin for just the purpose of learning Mandarin, I would hire a Mandarin tutor. However, there is something that I have a strong desire for her to do that I cannot just go ahead and hire a tutor her for. And that is to get into college, which I have just learned a tremendous amount about. And what I have heard from every college that I visited is that we want you to show us 4 years of progressive commitment to a language if you are a liberal arts student. And Westwood accepted her into the Mandarin program as a freshman. She dedicated herself to it, and she is now a dedicated sophomore. Well, if Westwood doesn't offer her a Mandarin program next year, she's then going to be a junior in Spanish 1. You have just killed her entire competitiveness in her college application process. So this is not about, for my family, the necessity of learning Mandarin. This is about enabling a student who we offered a Mandarin course trajectory the opportunity to finish that trajectory that they have committed themselves to for the past 2 years. If we eliminate that opportunity for next year, we are killing their college competitiveness opportunity. And it has just gotten so much more competitive. So if she is up against students from Wellesley and Needham and Dover who are taking Mandarin AP, which we don't even, I don't think, offer, she's going to show as a student that did 2 years of Mandarin and then went to Spanish 1 with freshmen. This is not an acceptable thing to do to a student by any means. So I respect the budget process. I am a businesswoman. But I think ethically, we cannot pull the rug out from under the students that we didn't tell 2 years ago we were not going to give them the opportunity to finish what they were starting when colleges are telling us that that is critical to them. If this was like, I don't want to put down another academic area, like a not, critical
Basket weaving.
Right, thank you.
Underwater basket weaving.
Thank you. I wouldn't be here. And I don't care personally about Mandarin, but colleges have told us that they need to see consistent progression from students. And that's what we're asking and telling the students to do. So we cannot take away their opportunity to do that. It's not like I can put her someplace else to show 4 years of progressive Mandarin in school.
Stacy, I'm sorry. I should have kind of given you the heads up. Everybody gets 3 minutes to comment.
Okay,
And you
sorry.
had 5, so
Thank you.
I
apologize. So
Thank
let me
you.
just think if there was one last point. My recommendation from a business perspective, if you need to kill Mandarin, is to kill it for oncoming students and figure out a way to have a part-time, less costly instructor let the children that are already in the program finish the program, because there is no way to give them the opportunity to make up for finishing this program if you totally kill it. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Herlihy, and I've been in Westwood for almost 11 years now. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in the public school system. I have one who's a sophomore at the high school, and then I have one who's in 3rd grade at the Sheehan. And I think Stacy did a really nice job of articulating all of the wonderful benefits that she's received in Westwood, and my family and my children have received similar benefits. And I am also here for a similar reason to Stacy, which is that my daughter is also in the Mandarin program, and actually called me from school today, which was very odd because usually she's texting, not during school hours. I think I saw Ms. Davenport here. After school, she called me in a panic saying that the Mandarin program was canceled, and she was very concerned about the impact that that would have not only on her college application, but just to her overall enjoyment of school, because she really enjoys Mandarin. I'll be honest, I wanted her to stay with Spanish when she was coming out of 8th grade. She was learning, she did really well at it, and she really had an interest in learning Mandarin. So I said, okay, you are very invested in this. It's your decision to make. So she made that decision, and she's enjoyed the class and done well in the class. And then again, as Stacy had already mentioned, that continuity of language is just not something that all the money in the world can buy, because they need to really achieve that through the school. So I do like and appreciate the budget constraints, and hard decisions have to be made, and that is not lost on me. But I would echo the request that the existing students be able to finish out their experience with Mandarin and not be put in a position where they're disadvantaged because of a decision that the school has made on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is April Heppelman, and I have two students here at the Westwood High School, one a freshman and one a sophomore, 9 Appleseed Lane. And I just want to echo the sentiments of Stacy and Sarah. Both of my girls are in the Mandarin program, and my girls took Mandarin prior to coming to the high school, and they enjoy it. And I also don't usually get phone calls in the middle of the day, and when my daughter called me and very upset that she found out that she was told that Mandarin was going to be cut, it upset me because she loves Mandarin, and I agree with Sarah and Stacy that you started this program, and it is not fair to the students to just cut it off. And if they want to get into some of the better universities, they are. I know it's not. They want the better universities want 4 years of a language, and to tell the students that they now have to start somewhere else, they have to start over, is not fair to them. And I'm just kind of at a loss for words because it upsets me, and I just take it to heart. So I just think that if you could consider the students that are currently in Mandarin and let them finish out the program. And I do understand that you have to find budget cuts somewhere, but I think there are plenty of other options that you can probably find. And I don't know. I'm just taking this it's to heart. So if you could just consider our sentiments, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shifted the agenda. I wasn't prepared for this. This was coming at discussion. I'm Allie Ricketson. I have two little ones, one who's finishing the integrated, the other who's at the Sheehan. It's really been an honor and privilege to be a part of the integrated for the past 4 years. So, doing my best to rep the community, that we have the privilege that we're kind of officially leaving that space. I think, without leaving judgment here, I really appreciate the questions that the committee has posed and the perspectives. I think I would strongly recommend any opportunity you have to now really engage the families. It's crucial to the impact and the success that you'll have moving forward, as well as the teachers. I certainly assume they've been a part of the dialogue, but for all of us in any line of work, context is huge. And so really, I would see all next steps being how you engage the current families who might have siblings, or just have those that are in the first year right now, probably sweating pretty heavy right now in panic of what to do, especially if they're working families, or just needing a little bit more of a fuller day. I think the reasoning behind it all holds a lot of weight and value, but it's really just that opportunity for the dialogue now. If there's anything I can share, would just be please take advantage of that, and I know it will go miles if we can provide that space for folks to ask questions and just learn a bit more and really make plans together, and how we connect and collaborate with the other preschools in the community. I think there's real opportunity there. There's a lot of richness in our town here, but the integrated is really special and has an incredible culture, and it's been a privilege to be a part of the executive board for 4 years. And so I know we want to keep that same culture and tightness with whatever changes need to evolve and grow as we work towards a longer plan of certainly a larger school, because I think that's the true ticket of what we need. But appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Ni hao. I'm going to bring it back to Mandarin for a second. I also have a daughter in the program. I think you've heard from the other parents.
I'm sorry, your name and
My
your
name
address.
is Bill Theophilou. Perhaps you've heard from Stacy Theophilou. I think you heard from the other parents all the logical, relevant pieces in terms of the emotion that the kids are feeling, the continuity, the importance of being in school. There's 3 sections. There's economics of trying to get down to 2, or all this kind of making the math work. I think another element here that hasn't been considered is just the competitiveness of Westwood. So, 40 years ago when I was in high school, Spanish was Spanish or French, right? French is the Romance language that was relevant in Shanghai 100 years ago, 130 years ago. Spanish had a lot of relevancy. I've been working in international business my whole life. Mandarin is what's relevant in 2025, right? And in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years. And, when you think about Dover, Wellesley, the other towns that we considered moving to 17 years ago, I remember hearing that, like, oh, well, Westwood has Mandarin, and that was like not back 17 years ago, but yeah, but it was when Westwood got Mandarin, it made us feel like, okay, well, we're not in a second tier town, we're in a forward-thinking town that's actually trying to be in tier 1 and competitive with the rest of the Massachusetts schools. And just, in terms of, our stature as a school district, as a town, and not just in the state, but also just globally, knocking out Mandarin, aside from, I mean, you heard about the professional way to sunset a program, so I don't want to go back to that, but just knocking out Mandarin for the brand of the town that we're proud to be in, I think puts us in a class that, you know, we'd be less proud to be in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kelly Donegan. I live at 101 Washington, and my son Jack is a first year at the integrated preschool this year, and I can't say enough about how much it has done for him. He got a spot in the lottery, which was the perfect lottery ticket for him because he ended up on an IEP, and it's just been the greatest program for him. And I guess that I'm here. I totally understand the reasoning behind the split, and honestly, I can't speak to whether I think it's good or bad right now. I think it's just a lot to absorb right now, but what I will say is to do it in September feels really rushed. I also have a 2-year-old who will be 3 in September, and we still don't have the application for the preschool next year, so we haven't even had the opportunity to put him in the lottery next year. And I've heard from other preschools that their 3-year-old program is already full. And just from personal experience, we put Jack in the preschool program because it was the perfect fit for him, and it really was a winning lottery ticket. But also, we already had to enroll him in a different preschool, and we already had to pay the first sum. So we lost money by putting him in the preschool, which at the end of the day doesn't matter because he is happy and he absolutely loves it there, and the staff is amazing, and we wouldn't want him anywhere else. But it does put families in a really big predicament, and I just think at this point in the year, families are already planning for the fall, and I totally agree with Allie, to open it up to the community would just go miles, but that also takes time, and then you're just putting families in a bigger crunch. And I mean, everyone's talking about how college is competitive, and I can't even imagine it because preschool is really competitive. So I don't look forward to getting to that stage. But I guess that my point to just bring is I definitely see the benefits of the proposal that you have brought to us. And I do just need to digest it. And I think that there are pros and cons to it. But I think implementing it in September is just a huge push that would put a lot of families in a really tough situation. So, and I really appreciate all the questions that the committee asked because they were a lot of the questions that I was thinking as well. So thank you. And I do thank you for the proposal because there does seem to be a need for what you proposed as well. So it is like a rock and a hard place, but at the same time, I feel like a September start is a really big push. And that's just my personal opinion. So thank you for hearing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other people wanting to comment? No, I'm not seeing anybody. All right, thank you, everybody. So we'll move along to chair update. I don't have an update to share. I'm eager to hear, thank you, Joanna and Tony, for hosting office hours this week, so I'm eager to hear how that went. I don't know if there are other liaison reports to share.
Go ahead.
I have nothing. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but we talked a lot at office hours about actually, I don't think this is on the agenda, but we talked a little bit about the cell phone policy. People came and expressed both gratitude and concerns and maybe additional resources that the district can provide to families, in support of families making this decision around cell phone use in schools, and the timing of getting cell phones and the social impact of that, so the way that we can support our families through that decision process. We also heard from families talking about the facilities at Thurston and how that folds in with other facility needs around the district and around the town. So we kind of debriefed a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about that again also later in the agenda. And then we talked about some leveling of classroom, individualized classroom instruction at the high school and some concerns there. It was a robust conversation. We had a good group. I think a couple came and went, but I think total we had 9 or 10, maybe 11 coming and going throughout the day. It was nice to. It's always a nice time to engage with the families and be able to have dialogue versus not be able to respond to things in this setting. So, grateful to the community for coming out on a Friday morning to share their thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I think that covered. I mean, I would just reiterate, we got 2 or 3 new people had never been before, and they actually emailed us afterwards saying how, wow, this was how great it was. So just for the community members here and watching on TV, that it really is a chance to really interact and ask, Tim, us, Caitlin, anybody, questions you have, and we can interact and have discussions that we can't have here. I mean, obviously, some of these questions are very timely, I understand, on the budget, but I just encourage people, everyone that seems to go really enjoys it and comes back and appreciates it. So our next one will be in March, probably?
I think probably April.
April, maybe before April break, okay.
Yeah, end of March, early
Early
April,
April, okay.
and it'll be an evening session, so we try to rotate, recognizing that people have different schedules, so more to come on that. Anything else?
Yeah,
Yes? Thanks, Kevin.
just a small comment regarding the cell phone policy. I think the leaders of Legislative Council, Nate Feinfeld, Sarah Lewis, Essie, and Georgia Perry, they attended the cell phone task force meeting, and I think, just as a comment, they noticed there may be some disconnect between the parents, teachers, and the students. I suppose that's to be expected, but I think there may need to be maybe some more student voice in the process. I'm not sure how many students actually go to these meetings, how much of our voice gets to be heard.
When you say there's a disconnect, what exactly is the disconnect?
Yeah, so in the agenda subcommittee meeting for us, leading up to our most recent meeting on the January the 7th, they shared some of the policies that I guess the task force was considering implementing, and I guess I don't remember them, but I remember one of the comments was that some of them seemed a little unreasonable, considering that we were high school students, and we are I hope we are a lot more mature than middle school or elementary school students.
If I can ask a clarifying question, I'm guessing this is the high school working group and not the district-wide task force. Okay. I was gonna say, I don't remember us putting,
Yeah.
There's Amy's group,
Yeah.
right, which is students. Right, no, in Legislative Council.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm confused.
So, okay. So there's 2 cell phone groups.
Yeah.
One is Tim's task force with a capital T.
Yeah.
2 T's.
with a district lens.
Which,
A
with a
district
district
lens,
lens,
Yeah.
which is parents, administrators, staff, students, all together. And I don't think that group has met since December.
Yeah, we're scheduling another meeting right now, but yeah.
Yeah, so we're planning to meet, but I don't think we've met since maybe November, I think even.
It's early December, I think.
Yeah. But then the high school itself has its own cell phone, I don't know if it's a task force.
Device policy task
Group.
force.
Okay. And that is not related to Tim's task force. It's the high school teachers and students.
Related but independent, I think is
Yeah.
a fair way of phrasing
So-
that.
Any changes to the policies?
Yeah.
Maybe you and I can connect.
Yeah.
There's been no policy changes other than the handbooks that were, yeah.
Okay.
And no
Thank you.
recommendations have come out of Tim's task force.
That's correct, not at this point.
Right, right.
So there is a disconnect.
Somewhere.
Somewhere, yes.
Any other liaison reports? No?
Sorry, can I just also
Yeah.
say, though? I do think, though, I could be wrong. I don't know how many students we have on our task
2.
force. I know there are a couple, but
Yeah.
I would be okay with more students being on the task.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we can have. I mean, we took all 2 students that applied. We put it out initially. But at the same time, that there may be a conversation to be had about including others going forward, now that there's a little extra sunshine on it.
Great.
Sunshine, I like that.
All right. So we will hand it back over to you.
Yeah, let's go to the budget, because that's what we do this time of year. So this is the FY '26 proposed budget. I know all the committee members have their books. We will deliver the books to Town Hall for FinCom members tomorrow. Just a couple of words of context before I get into the budget itself. So, I don't know how many people that are here in the audience or people that are watching are actively watching select board meetings, and I do appreciate the partnership we've had through budget steering. Amanda and Lem and I have met with Chris Coleman is the town administrator, and Joe Previtera is the select board chair, Stephanie McManus, and then Bill Bruce from the FinCom, as we do every year, and we appreciate that partnership. It's a tight year, and a significant part of the reason it's a tight year has to do with shared costs. A large increase on the town side as it relates to things that are just strictly out of the town's or anybody's jurisdictional authority here. A large increase in the retirement assessment for Norfolk County, a large increase in health insurance costs. And if we talk about things that are also out of our control, I mean, you'll see it as part of this budget here is the large increase in out-of-district special education tuitions. All three of those things are set by agencies out at a state level or a county level outside of our jurisdictional control. But as a community, we have to absorb those costs. And given the constraints of Proposition 2.5, that limits what we're able to do as a community. So that being said, we're putting forward a budget I think is responsive to our goals and our needs. And I think we'll address some of the issues that were raised earlier. So in terms of building the FY26 proposed budget, these are our annual budget drivers that you'll see every year. The number one is that we need to meet our contractual salary obligations. You'll see the pie chart that education is a people business in a second. But we also need to meet other inflation-impacted costs, particularly around transportation, utilities, services and goods, all those sorts of things. We want to maintain class sizes that are consistent with school committee goals. We need to address our needs in special education. And we want to continue to make progress on our educational goals, as articulated in our strategy for improvement. When we build the budget, we start with a level services budget by assessing contractual salary obligations and fixed costs. We then respond to those changes in enrollment and student needs, and then identify strategic additions or reductions consistent with those goals. I mentioned this before, 85% of our budget is salaries. You can't do teaching without teachers. You can't support students without support staff. And so that is the nature of what a school department budget is. So in terms of the proposed FY26 budget, the biggest cost driver is the contractual salary obligations, because if 85% of your budget is salary, that's going to be your biggest driver. We are currently in active negotiations with teachers and administrative assistants for contracts that expire this coming June. All other collective bargaining units are under contract through at least the end of next year. And so there is a compensation reserve to address for salary negotiations. We do have cost escalation in other areas, particularly transportation, special education. And in the area of special education, that's both non-salary, which is tuition, and salary, which is non-discretionary service addition to meet the needs of students' IEPs. The financial impact of a level services budget for FY26 is a 3.88% increase. We have landed this budget at a proposed budget of 3.52% increase. That's below that level services percentage. Knowing the constraints that we're under in this budget request, that we believe allows us to make programmatic changes consistent with our priorities for improvement, but also recognize the financial and fiscal responsibility we have to the community and its members. And that recommended budget is $58,761,682, which is just slightly under a $2 million increase from FY25. This shows you historically over time what the percentage increases have looked like. So the number proposed for FY26 is consistent with historical trends here. At some point, we're going to roll 16 and 17 off of this chart. But part of the reason to leave it there, that was the University Station years. And while that created a sizable increase in tax revenues at that point in time, that's baked into future years. Right, that increase does not keep compounding each annual year. That's baked in at this point. The large increase in FY24, which happened just prior to my arrival, was that big influx in Chapter 70 money that happened, which I'm still not sure if anybody can explain, but we're certainly appreciative that it came in. But we certainly don't anticipate that happening in this coming year. So this shows the breakdown of budget, a net increase in salaries for existing personnel of about $1.8 million. That swallows up almost the entire net change of essentially $2 million. And you see some ins and outs in terms of both FTE and money here. Student support staffing at Thurston. Actually, is there a typo on the slide? Is that an increase?
I think it's the net of two IA.
Oh, the two, okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. A change in student support staffing at Thurston, instructional staff and supports at Westwood High School, and then instructional admin support staff pre-K to 5. And we'll go through each of these in greater detail further later on in the budget. This shows what this looks like. This is the operating budget request per categories. Again, salaries are the biggest increase. Salaries are going up by 3.58% in this budget. The total is 3.52. I will talk about this a little bit later. The decrease in utilities offsets a commensurate increase in facilities, basically because we're trying to be responsive to what traditional budgetary spending is there. But you can also see that sizable 8%, little over 8% increase in special education costs in the operating budget. And this is that same chart, but this is all funds, not just operating budget funds. So this includes grants, revolving accounts. So this is the total expenditures for the district. In terms of enrollment considerations, sorry, I went too far there. There is no significant change in FY26 enrollment at the middle school or high school level. That's pretty steady. And actually, overall district enrollment at the elementary level is very steady from FY25 to 26. It's a single-digit change in number of students. But when we look at class sections, it's determined, unlike Thurston in the high school where there's only one building, the distribution of students across schools and grade levels is what we need to be responsive to when we look at elementary classrooms. I'd flagged this last year about the challenge with using census data to predict incoming kindergarten enrollment. Because we saw a major difference, and I'll show the slide in a second, we saw a major difference. That difference perpetuated in this year's enrollment. So in terms of building the FY26 budget, we're going to rely on the same methodology we did for FY25, projecting a little kindergarten enrollment from the previous year. That's that census data. So historically, it had been in the 20s, the difference between what was on the census and how many kids came to us in kindergarten. The last 2 years, it's been closer to 70. And so, again, the methodology we used for the current year that we're in worked. We're going to use that methodology. At the same time, during this fall, we're now tracking sort of better real time, not just in terms of holistic numbers, but building by building the delta between census to see if there are variations and trends we can use to better predict in the future going forward. But unfortunately, we only have like 2 years worth of that right now. So 2 years does not make a trend, but the plan is to build that out in the future. When we look at elementary enrollment for each grade level in each school, the guidelines that have been well established by this committee are 18 to 22 in grades K through 3, 18 to 24 students in grades 4 and 5. So despite the fact that overall enrollment is basically level, the FY26 budget does produce a net reduction of 2 elementary classroom teachers. That is actually an addition of 1 classroom at Pine Hill, and that is because there was a smaller than typical grade 5 class going out. So there'd be an increase in Pine Hill, but a reduction of 1 FTE each at Downey, MJ, and Sheehan for slightly different reasons in each case. And that just has to do with where, in one's case, it's because it's a bigger 5th grade class going out. In some other cases, it was one school, it's a class going from a class size lower in grade 3 to grade 4 where the thresholds are a little bit higher. And another building is where the number actually was below the threshold due to some enrollment changes. So this shows what the distribution is by building and by grade level projected. Again, you'll see those K numbers right now. We're anticipating level enrollment, but we have some flexibility with that for next year. But shows you how many students and how many sections in each grade level we anticipate in each building for the coming year.
And this is sorry, Tim, this is projected based on that 70 increase.
Yeah, so this is projected for K. Essentially, we're level projecting K. We don't have enough. I don't have enough trend data to confidently say it's going to be 70.
Yeah, sure.
So I think to be conservative, we're basing it on last year's numbers. And I want to acknowledge here, right, that if you we didn't put the math up here on the screen, but if you actually divide the number by the number of sections, you will see some variations by grade level and by school. But it's because when you have kind of numbers that are threshold, I'll just point to, for example, Sheehan grade 5. 53 students in Sheehan grade 5. That's 1 section of 17 and 2 sections of 18. When other buildings, Downey, for example, has 2 classes of 23. But if you divide Sheehan by 2, then you wind up with 2 classes of 28, which is well outside of guidelines, right? So where the fluctuations, the numbers are, has an impact on what class sizes are.
Is everything within guideline? I'm just doing a quick look.
Everything on here is within
right now,
guideline.
assuming there's no move-ins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some fluctuation. Okay.
Yeah, and we've identified areas that if we need to respond, we can. In terms of staffing changes, it calls, as we called it on the previous slide, staffing changes in 3 areas that are responsive to enrollment shifts. and student needs, speaking about Thurston, the high school, and then pre-K to 5. We're going to start with Thurston. The biggest increase here is an addition of a 1.0 language-based special education teacher at Thurston. We had created a district-wide elementary language-based special ed program at Sheehan called the LEAP program. The oldest students in that program are currently in grade 5. We want to make sure that we provide the programmatic continuity for students as they move into Thurston. So we would add a teacher to Thurston to bring that program in for next year. We're also, and I know and you'll see this in the future priorities as well, but we're adding a 0.4 FTE adjustment counselor at Thurston. This would bring us up to 2 full-time adjustment counselors in Thurston. This is responsive to the increased student mental health needs. This was the largest priority in the district, was at Thurston. This also allows one of our adjustment counselors to focus on students in our therapeutic learning center, while our other one can focus on students outside of the program. We'll also be reducing 2 instructional aides in this budget. That's able to be realized through an analysis of our student needs and doing some configuration of staff schedules to optimize efficiency of existing staffing. At the high school, we'd be adding a 1.0 FTE wellness teacher. That need was identified through the curriculum review, which was initially presented to this committee in 2023. It would provide programming to students in grades 11 and 12. It allows students to not only meet our local graduation requirements that calls for 7 credits of PE to graduate, but it's a state law that we've sort of been, I would say this allows us to meet greater compliance with state law around physical education having to be offered to students in all grades K through 12. There was certainly some conversation around Mandarin. To provide the context around this, so Spanish and French are currently offered in middle school. Mandarin doesn't begin until high school. Neither does Latin, for that matter. I'm going to acknowledge both languages in that case. But we have had a really historical struggle to maintain enrollment in Mandarin. This current year, we only have 9 students in Mandarin 1. And one of the things from our recently completed World Language Curriculum Review is for the majority of students, what they're looking to achieve is proficiency through language. It is really difficult to obtain proficiency when you're starting in a first-year language in 9th grade. That's why we saw the recommendations coming out of the World Language Review to potentially look at pushing into 6 or maybe into 5 in the future. At the same time, that also means that something else there's only so much time in the day. We're doing other curriculum reviews that will help inform these conversations around this. But I see this as a strategic retreat and regroup. I will say, as somebody who had the experience to take 2 years of Mandarin myself when I was in high school, and it ended there because I had a school that closed due to budget considerations and I had to go somewhere else, is that I believe in for all the reasons that I think it was created in the first place, I believe in the importance of that language, but we can't justify at the current time maintaining a full staffing for a program when we only have 9 kids that are enrolling in it. At the same time, we are keeping a 0.2 FTE in the budget to support students that are currently enrolled, whether that's through in-person staffing or through looking at virtual options. Tomorrow, a message will be going out to families and students that are currently in our Mandarin program about future meetings about what their options are related to this. So,
wait. Let me understand the point too. Originally, it was for Mandarin 2. Has that changed?
So it depends upon what our students are choosing to do. The priority is for students that are currently in Mandarin 1, right? There's a 2-year graduation requirement. So that is our priority. Whether or not there are options to be had, I think depends upon the conversations we're having and whether critical mass is. That budget is there to support students.
Yep.
And we want to make sure that we are able to do so in an appropriate way.
Do you know how many sophomores there are that are enrolled and how many then juniors?
I'd say it's a total combined of about 25-ish, I want to say, for students currently in Mandarin 2 and 3 combined. I believe that's the...
Okay. About 10 a year.
Sorry, I'm deferring to Amy here, who's... Okay, so that's 30 total, but that includes students in Mandarin 4 who are seniors? Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you...
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I was just curious how many were in sophomore. Okay.
I have 9 students in Mandarin 1, I have 17 in Mandarin 2, I have 11 in Mandarin 3. There is no Mandarin 4. No students enrolled.
No students enrolled. It's not because we didn't offer it.
So you have 17. Okay.
Yeah, if I can, let me just say that for anybody that's watching at home, right? The 9 students currently in Mandarin 1, 17 in Mandarin 2, 12 in Mandarin 3, no students in Mandarin 4, and that's been, 11 in Mandarin, 11 in Mandarin 3, and Mandarin 4 has remained unenrolled for the last 2 years. And the last thing related to the high school would be to add a 0.4 FTE building substitute. This would increase our coverage to 2.0. We've certainly heard concerns about students in classrooms. This would be commensurate with Thurston and Pine Hill. Speaking of pre-K to 5, we would reduce 2 FTE general education classroom teachers. I talked about this previously. In the context of preschool, I talked about increasing I forget what the hours are here, essentially 1 hour a day, 0.125 FTE in the administrative assistant position at the preschool. This is actually work that has historically required additional hours, and we would be proposing this regardless. But if the program structure of pre-K happens, this would support that structural change. And the last thing is reducing a 0.4 FTE administrative assistant for registration. We have historically subsidized the position in municipal IT, but that need has been absorbed by automating of some of our registration efforts, as well as the rest of it can be absorbed by existing school department personnel.
Tim, for the preschool admin, you're saying that they have been performing this. Have we just been paying overtime for it? Is that?
It's not overtime because it's not over the threshold for overtime, but we've been paying additional non-budgeted hours for the work that's been taking place.
Okay, so this is sort of putting into the budget something we have been paying.
It's right-sizing the existing, yeah.
Okay.
So can I say, not to come back to Mandarin, but so what are we at 0.8 currently on Mandarin? What's the FTE currently?
Yeah, it's 0.8 currently in the budget.
So, right. And so do we have I'm just trying to understand, if 0.8, that person teach 4 classes?
They would if we had 4 classes.
But this year they're teaching 3?
Yeah, it's 0.8 in the budget, currently filled as a 0.6.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Moving to the area of special education and non-salary changes. As I've said before, and I will continue to say in future years, the most variable part of any district budget is special education. We have created several district-wide programs, and the language-based program at Thurston will be a continuation of those programs that allow us to educate almost all of our students in district. We continue to have fewer than 1% of students attend out-of-district placements, which is an incredibly low number. But for those students who are out of district, the Operational Services Division has set a minimum for this year. The good news is it's down from the last 2. The bad news is it continues to be higher than previous historical trends. But OSD has set a minimum 3.67% increase on school tuitions for FY26. The reason I add the word minimum is because schools can request a larger increase than that. At least one of ours has for next year, and so we need to be responsive to those changes in tuition costs. This shows the breakdown in the operating budget of tuitions, residential day and collaborative, as well as transportation. There's a little bit of a decrease in in-district special education transportation, but there's transportation costs continue to escalate, tuition costs continue to rise, and again, these are responsive to the students that we currently know for FY26. So in terms of non-salary, if you actually add up these 2 numbers, you see a number that's about 356,000. The net increase is 210,000 in special education tuition transportation. That's because some of that is offset by circuit breaker, and I'll talk about that momentarily. We also have about a $56,000 increase in yellow bus transportation. That's our existing vendor contract. I think we're entering the first extension.
Year of an option year.
Yeah, so it's essentially we have up to 1 more option year beyond FY26 on our current transportation contract, but we'll need to account for the next time we bid that and for FY28 in a couple of years.
And the option fees are fixed in the contract, they're not market.
Yes.
And then I mentioned this earlier, it's essentially an increase in building maintenance and a decrease in electricity at the high school of $60,000 in each direction, a shift of budget funds to reflect historical spending. In terms of revenue assumptions, I mentioned circuit breaker previously. Again, circuit breaker is used as reimbursement from the state for generally for students that are out of district for costs that exceed 4 times the foundation budget. The way that we use this here is our FY26 budget uses receipts that were collected in FY25, which was based on expenditures that were spent in FY24. So are able to use budget lags 2 years behind the outlay of expenses. But the FY26 offset is $146,000 higher because our FY24 spending was greater than FY23 spending. You can also see some changes in grants. The IDA Special Education grant up by $54,000, and relatively small numbers in early childhood, MECO, and Title II, which is teacher quality. In terms of revenue, we talked last time about a 3% increase to bus fees, athletic fees, and preschool tuition. For bus fees, it was changed from 280 a student to 290 a student. We like to keep the numbers round, which is why I say approximate 3%. The family and cap would increase by $100 per family per year, with an anticipated revenue increase of a little over 10 grand. Athletic fees would change from 310 to 320 for most sports. The memo, actually, the budget narrative lays out for all sports. But that family cap is increased by 200 per year, again with a little over $10,000 revenue increase. And preschool tuition I had talked about previously. This shows bus fees in comparable districts for TEC. Dover, Sherburne, Medfield, and Medway do not have bus fees, but this shows what they are for TEC districts. And then for athletic fees, here we're looking at Tri-Valley districts because it's in the athletic league. So the base athletic fee versus the athletic fee cap for families. Moving into the capital budget, we are actually going to experience an increase of $123,000 in the base capital budget with some shift of priorities between categories. And you can see that proposal there. The planned projects and other upcoming priorities include roofing at Sheehan and Thurston, rooftop HVAC units and other mechanical systems at the high school, our constant device refresh cycle and technology, PA and VoIP systems. Science laboratory equipment, we're flagging it here. During our conversations, this is not something we've looked to put into capital before, and if you go back to these, this list here, you can see we've done a sizable increase in furniture, fixtures, and equipment. I think we had only thought about this previously as buildings and not about equipment inside of buildings in the same kind of way, or furniture, but not educational equipment. The way I can think about capital is if you're in a chemistry lab, the chemicals in the lab are operating budget, the beakers in the lab could be capital. And so we were able to offset some of the inflationary increase by shifting some of our equipment costs into the base capital budget. Security cameras, and then one of the things that has been requested that we're going to see if we can make it come to fruition, although there are issues with actually procuring, would be a multifunction student activity bus to help support transportation needs.
So by shifting the lab equipment into the capital budget, are we able to increase the amount we provide for equipment, or are we just shifting the line item?
Well, so the line item has remained steady in the budget. Obviously, costs have not remained steady.
Correct.
And so this allows us to address essentially what the cost of inflation is to some degree by making our purchasing, essentially increases the overall availability of funds to use. Just most of it is in the operating budget and some of it is in the capital budget. So the short answer to your question would have been yes. And I decided to give you the more complicated answer first. My apologies. The short answer is yes, because things that we might not have been able to buy by level funding the supplies budget, we can now put into the capital budget instead.
Okay. So there's a bigger pool of money available to buy science equipment.
Correct.
So I want to ask, so I pulled up my 2019 book. So that was before Lemma was even here. And actually the line item on the science budget is the same as it was in 2019. So, and we know inflation, what inflation has been. So, and you wouldn't believe the requests we're getting at PTO. We are getting requests for doing science experiments, basically. So if you said this was solid, I'll trust you for now. But if we keep on getting PTO requests, I'm coming back a year from now. And, no, and I'm really serious about this. It's kind of, if we're going to, STEM is not going away, I don't think. So I guess my ask is, when we do this, is actually communicate it to the, I think it's Mr. Miller and his team.
Andrew,
yeah, Andrew and his team, because otherwise they'll probably be like coming to us. If there is capital for them, let's let them know.
We'll make sure it happens.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to follow through on the proposals that we're making here, so I will make sure that we follow through.
Because
and
they
communicate
are
with the
putting
departments.
cap, what I call like beakers and God knows, nitrogen equipment. I don't know what it means.
Nitrogen equipment.
Yeah, those are nitrogen. I don't know. I go to this PTO meeting. Yeah, no. It's, right, Amy? Valves, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We'll mention outside of the school department's budget, there is an additional capital article that's going to be going forward to town meeting. This is for the electrical sub-panel upgrade at Sheehan. This was identified as a really high priority thing. And we'll actually talk about this, I think, in the context of the Thurston conversation in a minute, too. We know we have significant needs at Sheehan. We know we have significant needs at Thurston. We know we're going to have a conversation about long-term solutions for those buildings. Any realistic major long-term solution is a minimum of 6 to 7 years away, and that is absolutely best-case scenario. And so we need to make sure that we do the work we need to do to maintain the safety of students and staff in buildings in the interim. And having the electrical system at Sheehan go out would not be consistent with that priority. So it's an estimated project budget of $530,000. Both SMMA and our Dorn Whittier engineers both said, you got to do this, so we're going to do it and seek it through an additional capital article with anticipated work this coming summer. And then finally, comparisons and future priorities. This has been in the book every year. We can debate whether or not about different things, but this is compared to other high-performing high schools. We're sort of in the middle there. The green star is us, and you get a sense compared to other communities where we are. And then in future priorities, we talked about this before. There is, regardless of what happens from a model perspective, we're going to need additional space in preschool at some point. We just don't have it right now, but that is a priority. We prioritize Thurston in this budget, but we're going to need additional student mental health support. As part of last year's budget, future priorities, we talked about a district data analyst. I think that still is there. If you look at our bridge strategy for improvement, that's one of our key focal areas is around increasing the use of data. So there's going to be more that's happening with us and district data teams this spring. So that priority is going to be there in the future as well too. While we had an enrollment-driven decrease in elementary classroom teachers for the FY26, we anticipate that there's going to be an increase in the future. When you look at the enrollment charts that's in the budget book, you will see that starts to increase again. So I just want to be prepared that we're going to need to respond to that in future budget cycles. And then utility costs. So we are, the narrative is in the book, but we have benefited from having a contract around electricity in the community that expires in FY26, I believe.
During the FY27 fiscal year.
Yeah. So
December 26th, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So we do that in collaboration with the town, but eventually we're going to have to go out for a new utility contract, and that is going to have an impact, unsurprisingly, on what future costs will be. So we wanted to flag that as a future need. And just in general, priorities will be informed by the next iteration of our improvement strategy as well as the master facilities plan. And then finally, next steps, our public budget hearing on the school committee's vote is February 13th. The Finance Committee presentation and their budget hearing of the school budget will be February 25th. And then annual town meeting, as a reminder, was pushed back this year to May 19th. And that is the proposed FY26 budget. I'm happy to entertain any further questions or comments from the committee.
I have a question on if I can find it. The LEAP program, the additional support at the middle school. So I understand that's because the 5th grade coming in the fall has that program at Sheehan, and is that something where for FY27 we're then going to need 6th grade and 7th grade, or is this just a 6th grade transition program?
Yeah, no, it's we wouldn't anticipate needing another teacher in FY27. We might need to add an aide,
Possibly.
just because of ratios, depending on how many students there are. But it would not be we wouldn't need a separate teacher for 6th and 7th. It would be a multi-grade teacher.
Okay, and then sort of extrapolating on that, when they're in 8th grade and we have now 3 cohorts.
Fine. All of the district centralized programs are multi-grade.
But given that there's now 3 grades worth of students, we still wouldn't need an additional teacher?
Depending on the cohort of students, it's likely that we would not.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, there are ratios that are required around when you need to add aides to the classroom.
Right.
That would happen first before there was an additional teacher added.
Other questions or comments?
I have one, but I don't know if others, if you had more
No,
on
go
that.
ahead. I might have.
So I've got some things I'd like to talk about, think the committee should talk about. So based on some of the feedback. So I'm reacting a little bit to Mandarin and some of the feedback there and some of the data. And particularly, it seems like that sophomores going to junior year. I don't know why why seniors don't. It seems like they're not as much demand. I'm just wondering if there's alternatives where we can maybe not go to 0.6, maybe to go to 0.4 on that teacher. And there's two alternatives that, as I look at the budget. One is actually on this position. If this position, in theory, can assume 3 grades, maybe with an aide, do we really need 1.0 next year? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Why doesn't it be 0.6 or 0.8 or some other number? Because if they're going to be able to assume 6th, 7th, and 8th in 3 years, it seems like we could do a transition on that. So that's one idea. And the other idea is around wellness. I was a little surprised that for seniors, we're going to have them do 2.5 credits next year as part of the transition, which is basically a semester during senior year. Now, I understand we're trying to transition. The other alternative would be if we did a quarter, 1.25 for, so in other words, they could do a quarter for junior year, a quarter senior year, and eventually we'd hit, we'd hit that. That'd be another alternative. Maybe you can take wellness to 0.7, 0.8. I don't know I haven't done the math. Those are two alternatives quickly in this conversation that might be interesting.
I was thinking the same with the wellness and the Mandarin, if there was a way to kind of compromise there. So I would be in favor of exploring that more.
Yeah, let me just address the first part around the teacher at Thurston. Based upon programmatic delivery model, part-timing that teaching position isn't an option.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would need a 1.0 FTE regardless in that regard.
There's existing middle school students who would benefit from this model as well.
But wellness,
I'll defer the other until other committee members have a chance to
wellness,
speak.
we do have part-time. We've historically had part-time people, so I don't buy it on that one.
Yeah,
So
like I said, I'll defer any comments about that until hearing what other committee members have to say.
So I do think on the wellness issue, I do think it's a little bit harsh to make class of 2026 do a full, 2 semesters of wellness.
2 quarters.
2 quarters.
Yeah,
which is
semester.
1 semester, right? 2 terms. Sorry. I mean, we have not met this requirement forever or however long, and so it just seems like we're jamming it in on this one class when maybe we should give them the quarter that they would normally take, and then to Tony's point, start with the class of 2027, getting ourselves into compliance. And maybe there is some savings there. With the Mandarin thing, I think we could, I'm wondering if we can be creative for next year, but I'm just concerned about the longevity of it, right? I mean, if we solve for next year, then we still have the issue the year after, and it seems like if there's students who want 4 years, but it's a declining number, then, I just think it's going to be harder and harder to plan for it. So I think we need to kind of make that, we just need to understand that, right? And I also think that there are some legitimate concerns that maybe can be answered, particularly around college admissions. I went through that too. I have a freshman in college, and all of the schools want 4 years of language. Now, if a school doesn't offer a course, then I think that's different than a student stopping, after 2 and switching. But I do think that concern should be addressed, and maybe it will be when the announcement goes out to the parents.
Yeah, there's a letter that's already set to go out tomorrow that is differentiated, actually, depending upon whether or not students are in Mandarin 1, are in Mandarin 1 and also enrolled in another language, or in upper-level Mandarins, upper-level Mandarin classes that speaks to that explicitly.
Yeah.
But I think, I'm personally, I'm fine sunsetting it. In other words, we won't have a Mandarin 1 next year. At least I'm personally okay with that for now, given where, I don't know if the committee is.
I guess the issue, though, is that what if as we go through, then we have a Mandarin 3 class of 2 kids, right? Like I don't think you can staff that, right? You're not going to be able to find someone who's going to work 0.1.
Yeah, I mean, the options out there may include, for example, online options, right? So there are, and I know that those are things that exist. I don't know, well, we've always had students enrolled in some of the TEC classes, right? And so that is through our partnership with TEC Collaborative. TECA does offer virtual online classes. Unfortunately, right now they are not offering them in high school Mandarin. But there are other options, other similar options out there, right? So when we talk about a budgetary allocation,
And DESI accredits them?
They do, yeah. And they're, I don't want to name a particular vendor off the top of my head because I don't want to, I can mention TECA because we have a partnership with them.
Right.
I wouldn't mention anybody else sort of offhand. But they're, it is not an uncommon thing in schools across the Commonwealth and across the country to take advantage of sort of small enrollment access to courses that may not be able to be offered within the building itself.
But when we did the World Languages Review, I thought we were backing up when we were gonna offer Mandarin, so then if we.
Well, that was a recommendation.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's the recommend, you know, we're not in a position where we can do that right now in, whether it's 7th grade or 6th grade or whatever we do with that, because it would be premature for him to implement anything while we have other curriculum reviews that are ongoing, that are also part of that exploratory unified arts experience for students in middle school, right? And so I think we need to have a larger picture of what that looks like before we can have that conversation about implementation in middle school.
Yeah, I just was thinking, hey, if we reduce it and then we have a bunch of, students coming from the middle school that are then like, it's gonna be this pendulum that.
Well, so that's the thing, right, is if you build a strong and robust middle school program, you then have a large enough cohort to justify making sure that you have a sustainable high school program. Right, that's the intention over a longer period of time.
And thanks for bringing up the World Language Review. I was the school committee member liaison to that committee, and support the working group's recommendations to expand Mandarin into the middle school and expand languages into 6th grade. So, as we discussed when we were talking earlier this week, last week, about the budget, we were talking a little bit about this, possibly being kind of a short-term retreat in order to, think more dynamically about the coming years, because I think as a district, it would benefit our community if we offered Mandarin it gives students a chance to get to proficiency, which, as we talked about, you can't really do in 2 to 3 years in Mandarin just at the high school. You really need to start that at 7th, 8th, even 6th grade if possible. So to have that as a long-term plan makes me a little bit more comfortable with some of the shifts. But I also hear the community's concerns, and we'll continue to hear community concerns and questions about this. If there's a different way, even like a mixed classroom model where you combine, if we have a teacher on staff teaching Mandarin 1, can there be I don't know if this is possible, but a way to teach Mandarin 1 and 2 in the same classroom. So it's still, if the numbers are so small that they can be combined, then maybe there are some creative solutions we can do so that these students who want to continue their Mandarin study can do so into junior year and maybe senior year, depending on where we are.
How do you two feel about the wellness? I guess we kind of opined on the trend, whether you go big bang or not, or indifferent.
I'm a little indifferent about
Okay.
it. I mean, when I think about the wellness curriculum recommendations, I was, if I remember right, I was more excited about some of the other proposals.
Yeah.
But I also hear the compliance position as well. But I guess if I had to pick, I'd rather see Mandarin continue versus having gym for seniors, PE for seniors.
Well, they still have, I
They
guess.
still have it. They
How would
just
you
wouldn't
feel if
have
you had
it.
a semester of PE this year?
I was looking forward to my free block.
I mean, maybe we look to solve Mandarin for FY26 if we can. And in some combination of in some combination of wellness, and then, figure it out, see enrollment, figure it out on a going forward basis, but with the idea that if we are ramping down to build back up at some point, I just worry we're never going to build back up.
I mean,
we have been talking
I know,
about
I
foreign
know.
languages in the middle school for what, 15, 20 years?
It's gonna happen. Oh, yeah, Giuseppe.
Giuseppe will tell you we've been talking about it for 30.
Maybe before
right?
Giuseppe.
Yeah.
So I'm a little concerned because
Once you take away, it's hard to bring back. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't know what you're going to communicate tomorrow, but it isn't saying, it's not even if we had point 2, you know exactly what the plan is. Am I wrong?
What I would say is that if we were able to maintain a teacher at point 2, the priority would be students going into Mandarin 2 next year, right? Because of the graduation requirement that requires 2 years. I will just leave it at that, right? If we do, other than to say that if we do not have a teacher that is point 2, then that's a pool of money to look at how we provide options to students across the board.
down, but how many are in 2 now? Was it
17.
17?
17 and 2. So it's a bigger class than even the 1.
Correct.
And Amy, can you say how many are in Mandarin 1 or Mandarin 2, and that is their only language versus
There are 6 students in Mandarin 1 where Mandarin is their only language of the 9.
and what about 2?
Don't have the data on here for Mandarin 2. I'll need like 5 minutes.
That's okay. Sorry to put you on the spot. Thank you.
I feel like our trend is usually to present things sort of gradually rather than all at once. And it feels like what you're suggesting allows for a gradual change.
Which
while
one,
maintaining-
wellness or Mandarin or both?
Both.
Switch, swap,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the swap.
I think we should look at this.
I agree.
I do. I just think, I mean, 1.0 wellness is, it's a big one, right? When we're looking at what we're reducing and.
So let me echo back what I think I'm hearing from the committee, right? And I'm going to say this with full acknowledgement that this is not a proposed answer because we would need to go back and actually map out how this would look from a scheduling perspective. But if there was a way to, and as well as what the financial impact is of this as well too, what I'm hearing is if there was a way to reduce, because high school teachers are generally in increments of 0.2, right? If there was a way to reduce the wellness to, let's say, 0.8 and keep the Mandarin at 0.4, and that maybe involves a multi-level classroom, but would allow us to maintain that's. But it would scale back some of the grade 12. That's something that I seem without taking a vote, but like watching who's nodding heads as I'm saying this out loud, I take this as a direction from the committee to explore.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the Mandarin teacher currently is point?
It's a
0.8 in the budget, 0.6 in actuality.
So
Because of
he or she is a
demand.
0.6 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would take it to a 0.4.
Which would be potentially consistent with the elimination of Mandarin 1 as an option.
Right, because we
Pot-
wouldn't have
potentially,
an
right.
incoming class.
Yeah.
And still, we'll just delay, we're making progress on the wellness, and we'll get there with the class of 2027.
You're off the hook, Sean.
Unfortunately, my class of 27 son is not.
Well, at least it's over 2 years. I think
Yeah,
a
they
semester
still
is.
have to do it. They just
yeah.
do it over 2 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I mean, what I would say is I think a goal with that would be to still try to, if possible, and I can't speak to what's possible without like really digging into it. If there was a way to maintain something being possible, even if it's just a term for grade 12 students, that creates all kinds of logistical issues with scheduling because the steady state move, and I know the committee knows this, but I'll share this for the public in general, is that juniors would take the physical education class or the wellness class as a quarter opposite their financial literacy class, and seniors would take a wellness class opposite their civics class. But that doesn't exist for next year's grade 12 students, and so because there's nothing to pair it opposite of because of how we rolled out civics in the past with folks. So we'll need to go back to our drawing board a little bit, but I certainly get a directional sense from the committee.
And I just want to acknowledge, I think I'm really impressed with the work that you're doing at Thurston, bringing the language-based learning program and the additional mental health support. So I think that's a real positive. It's a win for the community. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I echo that as well. I'm happy to see that additional support for mental health at the middle school. I think that's very important. If I might also say for future hopes and dreams, I'm glad to see the district data analyst on there. I wish there was a way to get that sooner. I feel like we have a need of understanding our data, understanding and making informed, I know we're making informed decisions based on data. I just think the more support we can have for looking at that data and, you can't manage what you can't measure. So let's have more measurement.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work.
Yeah, thank you.
Lemma, especially,
Thank you. Thank you.
You're landing the plane. We're almost
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
So
I
close.
do want to give credit to obviously the whole team, but particularly to Lemma,
Lemma,
who
yeah.
does all this work behind the scenes.
Oh, we know.
I know you know, but I want to say that to everybody else out there too, that should know that. So.
And I think it's also, it's a great credit to you for being able, and everyone who worked on this, to be able to come under level set spending. This is an impressive budget. Thank you.
No, and if I can just add one more, I mean, I do, all the members of our admin council, so that's our central office team, our principals, our assistant principals, our deans, our SEL coordinator. One of the things that I really appreciate in our conversations, sometimes when budget times are tight, they can, and I would just speak I just speak in general, in any context, they can degenerate into people trying to protect things and not being transparent in the conversations. That's not the case with this team here at all. We are really engaging in some authentic conversations with a big picture in mind. I thank all the members of the team for doing that, so thank you all. So.
I think it was also, I don't know, I wasn't on budget steering, but I think it was also a pretty cooperative process with the town
Yeah.
as well.
Absolutely.
So.
Can I say one more thing, not to bring us back to the Mandarin conversation? I just want to acknowledge that it sounds like maybe there's some communication shared with students prematurely, and that's unfortunate because it's obviously led to some confusion and misunderstanding around where we are in this process. But I'm grateful for the community for coming out and sharing those concerns so that we had a chance to have this conversation.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going to Thurston Middle School Facility Challenges.
Even better, Tom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're getting all the hits tonight. And so, obviously we had a situation a couple of weeks ago, January 3rd, where there was a power outage at Thurston. Just to kind of explain to the community as a whole, there was a power outage at Thurston. We then identified that there was a gas smell up on the second floor above the main office in the science area. But up on the second floor in the science area. Out of an abundance of caution, knowing that we want to protect maintain the safety of students and staff first, we evacuated the building. Students were relocated to the high school for about an hour and a half until we got the all clear. Actually, Tony, if you don't mind for one of these.
It's so hot back here.
I know, I opened the door.
So crazy.
Oh, I know, that's okay. Just move it down. Thank you.
Sit before I keep talking. Thank you very much.
What's that? Yeah, sure.
I'm like going on water 3 here.
Dying.
No, I'm good. Well, maybe not. I'm good, I'm good.
It's really hot.
So we had the.
Tim, of the 17 students enrolled in Mandarin 2, 11 of them are only taking Mandarin.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
It was a good time to take a pause while I was taking a sip of water. So, that was an unfortunate situation. And obviously, this comes on the heels of another situation about a month before, where there was a leak in a sewage pipe underneath the building in Thurston. And we had to dismiss school early that day as a result. So just to provide some context here, I don't think anybody is unaware of the fact that Thurston is at its core a nearly 90-year-old building with some other parts added in the 50s, another part added in the 90s, and a couple of modulars. And so there are significant needs in that building. I do want to say, and clearly, right, there are significant needs at Sheehan too. We are not talking about these right now because we haven't had that issue, but we certainly have had issues in the past at Sheehan. And this is exactly why we're doing the master facility study that we're doing, is so that instead of just continuing to put Band-Aids on old buildings and hoping that they're going to maintain and hold, we actually want to have a mid to long range plan for how we address these needs systematically over a period of time. I do want to give a ton of credit to Tom Carey and our facilities team, and Lemma as well. We're just giving you all the praise tonight. Who are really doing the work that they can do as much as possible proactively to address the needs, whether it's preventative maintenance, whether it's really working with our contractors in HVAC or in or electrical or other areas. But there's only so much that you can plan for. And again, particularly at Thurston, a 90-year-old Frankenstein of a building. And so I will say, in terms of the issue with the gas that happened the other day, we discovered there was essentially a faulty install related to the Bunsen burners in the science labs, so that when the power went off, the gas came on, which should not happen. So that problem itself has been corrected, and so we don't anticipate that happening again in the future because that problem has been corrected. But at the same time, given the recent events and concerns around both of those events, We are conducting an indoor air quality test. I don't know if that's already happened this week or that's happening later this week.
Scheduled for Friday.
Scheduled for Friday of this week, just so, again, we can proactively address anything we find in the building to maintain the safety of Thurston. I think at the same time, I believe it is, I wanted to have this conversation here first and hear what the committee has to say, but I think it may be time for us to put just some general messaging out about this to the community. I'm certainly happy to write that and share that. Again, I think this is the venue to start that conversation. But just, you know, even when we were at office hours, some of the people that came that had concerns about Thurston that didn't know that we were doing this facility study and that there was a long-range plan. Now that there's a little more anchoring given recent events to tie this to, I think some messaging around that would be valuable and go a long way, if that's something the committee is on board with. I'm not sure really what else there is to be said about this front, other than a you know, thank you to Mike Redmond and Aaron Banty, and the staff and students of Thurston for on that day. It's not easy to take, you know, 700 middle school students and relocate them in the middle of the day. But they did it incredibly well, and thanks to everybody there for the work they did that day to get back, so learning could resume in the afternoon. So, but I'm happy to entertain any thoughts from the committee about this.
Would that communication be district-wide?
We would do it district-wide, yeah. Again, because not only, obviously there have been issues at Thurston, but I think, again, the Sheehan folks need to know what's going on, and any families that are in preschool or in Downey or in MJ or Pine Hill that are going to be going to Thurston in the future should know what we're doing as well.
Yeah.
High school parents may be okay, but at that point we're sending out district-wide regardless. So.
I think it's really important to be communicating this. We talked a little bit about this too when some of these issues popped up, but you know, I know we've talked about obviously in these meetings, you know, we've shared other communications, but just kind of putting it all in one place for families, both addressing the issues that came up, reinforcing the student safety is always our priority, and then looking longer term about how we're thinking holistically about these facility needs is, I think will go a long way to help people understand where we are as a district.
Yeah, I also think once the facility study comes out, we're going to be looking to the community for feedback, for comment, for, you know, sort of walking through that process with them. So I think this will set the stage for that as well.
Yeah, we'll start the roadshow at that point in time. And it's funny, I was actually talking with Steve Ouellette recently about the URL that directs to the Pine Hill building project we can repurpose for our facility study work. Just so that we can maintain a presence and everything all in one place.
What's the timing for that, do you expect?
Soon. What I would say is yeah,
through the budget.
Let's get through the budget. So I would say late winter, early spring.
Oh, good. Sooner than I thought.
Yeah.
Maya and I were at the TMS PTO meeting last night, and I think we both had to leave a little early for different meetings, but I think I came late, you left a little, and one of the things that did come up were quite a few parent concerns around the issue that happened. I will say, I don't think they were concerned that there hadn't been communication on that day. There was actually a lot of like, that was really fantastic. They felt like they weren't concerned, they knew what was going on. And that Aaron sort of notated as well, the student sort of behavior was fantastic, really outstanding, which is great. I think there were a couple of concerns that came up from parents about overall health and safety of their child being in that building and continuing to be in the building. And so I don't know if your memo will address that piece. But I think there are some folks who are feeling a little concerned about the continued safety of their student.
Yeah, and again, I think that's why we're going to do the IAQ test, right? Is we want to proactively try to at least address some of those concerns. And certainly, if there are families that have individual concerns, certainly feel free to reach out to my office, and we can have those conversations.
Yeah.
As well.
Luckily, Aaron was there, and I think 2 teachers were there to kind of, we fielded some of the questions. Yeah, so that was great. I was really glad Aaron was there. But I think it would be helpful for people to know that their child is safe. And I did also point out to folks, you know, when a memo goes out district-wide, I think that's helpful. when there's a problem in an individual school, that school finds out, but the rest of the community doesn't. And so, you know, I have received a few calls the past few days that, you know, is Thurston kind of rising in the ranks in terms of our concern as a board? And I'm like, look, as a Sheehan parent, I get the communications about Sheehan, and I also get the communications about Thurston because I'm a Thurston parent as well. But if you're at, I don't know, Martha Jones or Downey, you may not be seeing what's happening at the other schools. So just be aware that Tim's team is on top of it, and that we are aware of the issues and not trying to force rank anything.
And again, when, because are we behind on the RFP? I'm a little I mean, I thought Dorn Warrior was going to deliver by now.
We are consistent with the last conversations we had with them.
With the contract?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when is it going to be delivered? Because, look, we're halfway through the year.
Yeah.
And you know, nothing happened. It's hard to engage people, you know, once May hits. So the clock is ticking, I guess, if we want to engage community. Right? Okay. I mean, right? You agree? Because, I mean, I thought it was, I guess I'm a little confused. I thought it was going to be done by the end of that last year, but okay. Particularly as there's other capital, people want this in the context of potentially other capital projects that are on the immediate horizon.
Anything else on this front, or move to the next thing?
I think we can move right along.
And we already addressed preschool structure and tuition, so we can skip over that one. So last thing on discussion items is just the second reading of the graduation requirement policy. There are no changes from the last one. This is simply the language that after question 2 passed that would eliminate the provision in our policy that says that students have to pass the MCAS, because there is no such thing as passing the MCAS anymore. And we still await any further guidance from the state, but that won't impact students in the class of 2025. So my recommendation remains that the committee during action items votes to waive the third reading and accept the policy revisions as proposed. So.
Any comments on that? We're gonna vote on it anyways. All right, so we can move on to action items. Is there a motion to approve the December 17th minutes, meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. And is there a motion to waive the third reading and accept the revised policy IKFA graduation requirements that Tim just mentioned?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. What would we like to do about the integrated preschool tuition rates? Do you want to address that now or wait until February 13th?
I think we have to give parents some certainty about something.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say let's just approve a 3% for next year, and even if the schedule remains the same, just have it, that would be my recommendation. It's a 3% increase regardless of scheduling.
Would that be helpful for your process as well and plans for next month?
I think we're ready to take any recommendation, so
Yeah.
that one would be
I would agree
fine,
with
yeah.
that.
All right, so
That won't negatively impact the budget in a way that we'd have to.
No, the budget's built on a 3% increase right now.
It's built on the 3% increase, yeah. That's another reason to.
Yeah.
So I make a move to approve the 2025-2026 Westwood Integrated Preschool tuition rates.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. And then approval of the Michael, I hope I'm saying, Frucci Athletic Scholarship.
Yeah, this is a scholarship that would endow $1,500 each year to a senior graduating athlete who's demonstrated leadership, teamwork, and academic excellence while at Westwood High School, and who's interested in studying business at a college or a university.
Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved, and thank you for that generous scholarship opportunity. And then, would you like to address the next item, the field trip?
So the proposed field trip you have is a spring 2026. As again, we've started up international travel again. So it's a spring 2026 European travel program that would be led by Chris Hilton as the social studies department head. It would arrive in Berlin. Essentially, it's a World War II trip. So arrive in Berlin, go from there to Dresden to Prague, then on to Krakow, we'll be going to Auschwitz, and then finishing in Budapest before turning back to Boston. So this would be for April of 2026.
I know in the past we had problems with the vendor that, was it a vendor that had run international trips?
It's a different vendor.
It's a
Different vendor, yes.
Yeah, this is the vendor that we had for the other trips.
Yes.
Okay, and it's been vetted and,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they're doing a number of trips for us this year.
Oh, great, okay.
They're doing the Dominican Republic service trip.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a bigger operation.
Yeah.
And is there any, like, financial aid available for students who maybe couldn't afford the $4,400 fee?
There are scholarships offered through ES directly.
Oh, cool.
Students can apply directly to the scholarships, and then they also provide fundraising resources for students. We can also create like an individualized GoFundMe page that's run through their website, so that's helped to mitigate the
Okay, thank you.
For this particular trip, is it, I see it's, specifically for 11th and 12th grade, is it students in a certain course? Like, do they have to be enrolled in AP history or whatever? Okay.
No, it's open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Actually, just before the last one, can I correct something that I may have, I think I was inarticulate in my words earlier talking about Thurston and what happened. When the electricity went out, the gas in the building didn't come on. It released the gas that was in the Bunsen burners was the issue.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Mike, for catching my poor word choice. The gas shut off, but the gas in the Bunsen burners was released, so, yeah.
So it wasn't an active gas leak in the building?
Yes, that is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought that was really important to correct the record.
Thank you.
Please do.
And then the last item is revision to the TEC Collaborative Agreement. I know that you had mentioned this before.
Yeah, I had flagged this before to the committee. So the Board of Directors at TEC, of which I'm a member, voted on December 13th. We had a request from 2 districts to join the collaborative. That was Sharon and King Philip. We voted unanimously as a board to accept those 2 districts into the TEC Collaborative. But consistent with the Articles of Agreement, each member's school committee has to vote to accept the revision to the agreement to include these 2 districts. I see no reason not to, I mean, I voted as an individual board member to support it. There's no impact on us here, and so I would recommend the committee vote to approve that revision.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Is there any new business anybody would like to bring up? Nothing? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.